What if I told you that a single decision made decades ago still shapes your paycheck today? This isn't just history, it's the blueprint of the world you live in. Behind every economic collapse is a story the textbooks forgot to tell. In 2025, living on $1,500 a month in the United States feels like navigating a financial minefield. Every expense is a decision, every purchase is a compromise, and yet millions of Americans are doing exactly that because they have no other choice. But here's the thing. Your struggle to afford groceries, rent, or a single trip to the dentist isn't just a matter of personal budgeting. It's the outcome of decades, if not centuries, of policy decisions, global power shifts, and financial experiments that rewired the very architecture of daily life. In this episode of Global History Uncharted, we're going to dissect a monthly budget of $1,500, not just as a personal challenge, but as a historical consequence. We'll trace the origins of wage stagnation, the price of housing, the cost of food and healthcare, and why a budget that once supported an entire family in post-war America barely gets you through the month today. This is not just about a number. This is the story of economic survival in the richest country on Earth. Part 1. Historical roots from breadlines to paychecks. Let's begin in the year 1945. The world is breathing after the long, agonizing exhale of World War II. American soldiers are returning home, not to depression, but to opportunity. The GI Bill is rolling out. Suburbia is being invented. Wages are rising, and so is hope. Meet James Whittaker, a 28-year-old veteran from Ohio. He walks into a job at a manufacturing plant in Dayton and earns the equivalent of $40,000 a year in today's dollars. His wife stays at home with their 2 children. They buy a modest house with a white picket fence, a Chevy, and a brand new Frigidaire. He budgets $110 a month for the mortgage, $15 for groceries. Gasoline is 21 cents a gallon. This isn't fiction. This was middle-class America in the making. Between 1945 and 1973, the American economy grew like wildfire, and so did real wages. But there's a reason that prosperity felt so wide. Labor unions were strong, the top marginal tax rate was 91%, corporate profits were reinvested into jobs, and international competition was still licking its wounds from the war. The average American worker shared in the gains. But as always in economic history, golden ages are never permanent. Part 2. The rise, the shift. From wages to Wall Street. The shift began slowly, imperceptibly, like the faint tick of a clock in a quiet room. By the late 1970s, inflation was raging. Oil shocks from OPEC, the Vietnam War, the breakdown of the Bretton Woods system, the end of the gold standard. America was changing, fast. Enter the Reagan era, deregulation, tax cuts, union busting, and globalization. Wages stopped keeping pace with productivity. CEOs began earning 30x the salary of their average worker. Today, it's over 300x. And the James Whittaker of 1985? He's now the son of the original, Daniel Whittaker. Daniel doesn't work in a factory. That factory moved to Mexico. Instead, he works retail, part-time, no benefits, and drives for UPS on the weekends. His rent is now $400. His groceries are $120. His income hasn't kept up, but the cost of everything else has. This shift wasn't an accident. It was a structural realignment. Consider the 401k, introduced in the early 1980s. It seemed like financial empowerment, but it was also the slow disappearance of guaranteed pensions. Healthcare, tied to employment, still fragile. Education, the cost of a college degree has risen by over 1,200% since 1980. Let's bring it closer. By 2005, median household income in real terms had barely budged since 1973. Yet housing prices had more than doubled. Food had become more processed, more expensive. Healthcare, out of reach for millions. And then came 2008, Part 3, Modern Implications. The price of staying afloat. Let's fast forward to today, or maybe to you. You make $1,500 a month, that's $18,000 a year, below the federal poverty line for a family of 2. But maybe you're single, maybe you're doing gig work. Maybe you're like Jordan, a 29-year-old in Phoenix, Arizona. Jordan works 3 jobs, Amazon warehouse on the weekend, barista during weekdays, and freelance illustration on Fiverr. Rent, $820 a month for a room in a shared apartment. Groceries, $250 a month, mostly canned and frozen. Phone and internet, $90 a month. Gas, $20 a month. For the 2007 Toyota Corolla, they're still paying off. Insurance, $85 a month. Emergency savings. Jordan's life is a juggling act. One missed shift, one illness, one flat tire. It's all it takes to bring everything crashing down. And Jordan isn't alone. 63% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Medical debt remains the #1 cause of bankruptcy. Rents have increased 25 to 30% in many cities since the pandemic. Let's examine another case. Teresa, 44, is a single mother in Birmingham, Alabama. She works as a nursing assistant. Her income is steady but limited. She receives SNAP benefits and splits her budget like this: $700 rent, $300 food after SNAP, $200 childcare, $100 gas, $50 miscellaneous, $150 for utilities and medical. That's $1,500. Exactly. No room for joy. No room for error. It's not bad budgeting. It's bad economics. Part 4, the unseen story. The illusion of choice. We often hear, just budget better, cut the lattice, cook at home. But the truth? The problem isn't Starbucks. It's structural. Let's expose a quiet fact. Since the 1980s, nearly 90% of income gains have gone to the top 10%. The middle class has been hollowed out like a shipwreck on the ocean floor. And while wages stagnate, everything essential, housing, healthcare, education, has become privatized, financialized, and out of reach. The story of your $1,500 budget isn't one of individual failure. It's the result of a financial system designed to reward capital over labor. Stock markets rise, even as child poverty increases. And here's the kicker. Every dollar you spend is taxed more than capital gains. Your labor is penalized. Wealth is rewarded. This is not a glitch. It's a design. Part 5. The layers of inflation and the invisible tax sag. Inflation isn't new, but who it hits and how hard, it always depends on your place in the hierarchy. Let's go back to Jordan, the freelance artist in Phoenix. Last year, their monthly rent was $680. This year, $820. Same apartment, same neighborhood, no renovation, no added amenities. When they asked their landlord why, the answer was simple: that's just the market rate. But the market isn't some magical force of nature. It's constructed, and the rules of that construction are set by the past. Consider the 1970s again. When inflation spiked due to oil shocks and loose monetary policy, it was labor unions that pushed back, demanding cost of living adjustments. But today, most workers don't have that protection. Real wages aren't indexed to inflation. Fixed incomes aren't flexible. So every price hike on gas, food, rent isn't just a cost, it's a cut. In fact, inflation is a stealth tax. It erodes your purchasing power without ever going through Congress. And guess who benefits? Debt holders, asset owners, corporations with pricing power. Let's break it down. If you're wealthy, your assets inflate. Stocks go up, real estate appreciates. If you're poor, your bills inflate, your rent rises, your groceries spike. It's two economies living side by side, mirrors of each other, but never touching. Now let's add a third layer to Jordan's story: student loans. Part 6, the degree trap, or why college isn't a ladder anymore. Jordan went to a for-profit design school, promised job-ready skills and industry connections. What they got was $38,000 in debt and a certificate that employers don't recognize. It wasn't always this way. In 1965, the Higher Education Act made federal loans widely available. The goal? Broaden access to college. But by the 1990s, colleges, especially private ones, realized something. If students could borrow unlimited funds, why not raise tuition? And raise it they did. Between 1980 and 2020, the average cost of college in the US rose by over 1,200%. Meanwhile, wages for graduates stagnated. Jordan's $150 monthly student loan payment might seem manageable until you realize it competes with their ability to buy groceries or fix a leaking radiator. Here's the cruel irony. The promise of upward mobility through education has become a trapdoor. For millions, college is no longer a ladder. It's a treadmill with a steep monthly fee. But that treadmill was built with bipartisan consensus under the belief that education pays. It still does for loan servicers, hedge funds, and endowment managers. Part 7. Rent, America's silent crisis. Let's turn to Teresa again, the single mother in Birmingham. Her rent is $700 per month. That's half her take-home income. She qualifies for a housing voucher, but the waiting list is 5 years long. This isn't unusual. Today, over 11 million Americans spend more than 50% of their income on rent. Economists call this severely cost-burdened. Politicians call it a concern. For renters, it's a crisis. So why has rent exploded? Zoning laws that limit supply, real estate speculation fueled by low interest rates, private equity firms buying up rental stock and hiking prices, the erosion of public housing since the Reagan era. In cities like Austin, Nashville, or Denver, the dynamic is even worse. Tech booms flood neighborhoods with wealth, but local incomes don't rise with the cost of living. Let's not forget, rent is money you never see again. It doesn't build equity. It doesn't protect you from eviction. It just disappears. And in many American cities, it now takes 3 full-time minimum wage jobs to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. Part 8. Globalization, the biggest force you never voted for. Jordan's warehouse job? Part-time, no benefits. The company, technically based in Ireland for tax reasons. The goods, manufactured in Vietnam. The profits, stored in offshore accounts. This is globalization, and while it has lifted billions out of poverty abroad, it has hollowed out the wage base in places like Flint, Akron, and Buffalo. In the 1990s, NAFTA promised efficiency, China's WTO entry promised lower prices, and Wall Street promised higher returns. They all delivered, just not to the same people. U.S. workers saw their bargaining power evaporate. The factory moved to Guangdong, the call center went to Bangalore, and your job? It got contracted out. Jordan's story isn't just local, it's geopolitical. They're competing not just with their neighbors, but with billions of people they'll never meet. In a world of frictionless capital and immobile labor, the budget squeeze isn't just about what you earn. It's about what you're worth to a global system that doesn't need you full-time anymore. Part 9, the gig economy, a promise unfulfilled. Let's say Jordan wants to make more money. They turn to the gig economy. DoorDash, Instacart, Upwork. At first, it feels empowering. Set your hours, be your own boss. But the truth emerges quickly. There's no sick leave, no retirement, no guaranteed income, and the algorithm is always watching. Gig work was supposed to be flexible, but it's mostly brittle. In many ways, it's a return to the 19th century labor model. Piecemeal wages, inconsistent shifts, and a total lack of protections. A recent MIT study found that after expenses, most gig workers make less than $10 an hour, and many supplement their gigs more gigs. It's survival through multitasking. And once again, the system wins. Labor is cheap, overhead is outsourced, and risk is pushed onto the individual. Jordan's $1,500 budget? It's the result of an economic model that has digitized instability. Part 10. Credit and debt, modern chains. Let's return to Jordan one more time. They just got a credit card, $3,000 limit. It feels like breathing room, but it's a trap door waiting to open. Jordan uses the card to pay for new tires, something they couldn't afford in cash, then groceries, then a medical copay. Before long, they owe $2,400. The interest rate? 24.9%. Credit was once seen as a bridge, a tool to help households smooth out temporary dips in income. But for many Americans, credit has become a substitute for income itself. And the numbers don't lie. The average U.S. household carries over $6,000 in credit card debt. 40% of Americans say they couldn't cover a $400 emergency without borrowing. Buy now, pay later, BNPL, services have doubled since 2021. Debt isn't just a financial mechanism. It's an emotional weight. It changes how people sleep, how they parent, how they vote, and its history is darker than we remember. In the early 20th century, debt was frowned upon. Installment plans were for furniture, not survival. But by the 1950s, consumer credit was normalized. By the 1980s, it was weaponized, especially in poor communities and communities of color. Payday lenders, predatory car loans, and rent-to-own scams filled the gaps left by a retreating welfare state. Debt replaced dignity, and today it's baked into every $1,500 budget. Part 11. Healthcare. Pay to live. Meet Luis, a 53-year-old bus driver in Kansas City. Last year, he had chest pains. He hesitated to go to the ER. He has insurance, but his deductible is $5,000. When he finally did go, he was billed $12,400. After coverage, he still owed $4,300. He paid with a credit card. In the United States, being sick is a financial decision. It's not just about health, it's about risk, income, and survival. Jordan, who earns $1,500 per month, can't afford a checkup. Teresa delays her daughter's dental work. Luis skips medication to make rent. But why is healthcare in America so expensive? Administrative overhead, billing systems, coding, insurance processing, profit-driven hospitals and pharmaceutical companies, lack of centralized price negotiation, unlike most developed countries. And then there's history. During World War II, wage freezes pushed companies to offer health insurance as a perk. That quirk became the basis for employer-based healthcare, a system now almost impossible to escape. Today, America spends twice as much per capita on healthcare as other wealthy nations. And yet we have lower life expectancy, higher infant mortality, and the highest rates of medical bankruptcy. Healthcare isn't just a cost, it's a cliff, and many are already falling. Part 12, the cost of food. Why fresh is a luxury. Let's walk with Jordan through the grocery store. They pick up frozen meals, canned beans, white bread, and instant noodles. The produce aisle? Too expensive. Organic section? Out of the question. This is the quiet inequality of food. In theory, America produces enough food to feed its population multiple times over, but access, quality, and price vary wildly. Fresh produce costs more and spoils faster. Food deserts limit access to healthy options. Subsidies favor corn, wheat, and soy, processed food ingredients. The result? Poorer Americans eat cheaper calories, high in sugar, salt, and fat. Over time, that leads to chronic illness, which of course leads to higher healthcare costs, which leads back to debt. The loop is brutal and profitable. In the 1970s, under Agriculture Secretary Earl Butz, the motto became, "Get big or get out." Farm consolidation exploded. Small farms disappeared. Corporate agriculture took over. What did that do? It made fast food cheaper than a salad. It made high-fructose corn syrup more affordable than fruit. It made profit out of malnutrition. Your $1,500 budget doesn't just decide what you eat, it shapes your long-term health. And in America, that's an economic fate. Part 13, transportation. A nation built for cars, not people. Jordan spends $120 a month on gas for their Corolla. Why not take the bus? Because it doesn't run on Sundays. Because there's no safe sidewalk. Because waiting outside at 5 a.m. feels dangerous. America's cities are designed for cars, not people. It wasn't always this way. In the 1930s and 40s, streetcars connected neighborhoods. But by the 1950s, General Motors and oil companies quietly bought up and dismantled public transit lines across dozens of cities. They wanted a car-dependent America, and they got it. Eisenhower's Interstate Highway Act in 1956 sealed the deal. $25 billion to create the largest highway network in the world. It boosted the economy and segregated it. Highways split communities, often black and immigrant neighborhoods. Suburbs expanded. Car ownership became a necessity, not a luxury. Today, transportation is the second largest expense for most U.S. households, right after housing. And if you're poor, you often drive the oldest, least fuel-efficient, most unreliable vehicles, which cost more in the long run. It's the cruel irony of American infrastructure. You're punished for being unable to afford efficiency. Part 14, the politics of budgeting. Who decides what's possible? Every election cycle, you'll hear the same phrases. We can't afford that. That's not fiscally responsible. We must tighten our belts. But whose belts? Because while Jordan counts pennies at the gas pump and Teresa skips dinner to feed her kids, Congress debates budgets in trillions, with corporate subsidies, defense contracts, and tax loopholes often untouched. The political reality is this: austerity is selective. In 2008, the government found $700 billion overnight to rescue the banks. In 2020, the Fed pumped trillions into financial markets to stabilize Wall Street. And yet, when asked about universal health care, free college, or housing support, suddenly the national wallet slams shut, and the framing matters. A $1,200 stimulus check? Socialism. A $1.5 trillion corporate tax cut? Growth strategy. Child tax credits, dependency, oil subsidies, energy security. It's not about what's affordable, it's about what's prioritized, and priorities are shaped by power. Jordan's $1,500 budget doesn't come from laziness. It's the result of political choices, stacked budgets that reward capital and neglect labor. As the saying goes, a budget is not just an economic document, it's a moral one. Part 15, the global context, how America compares. So how does the United States stack up? Let's zoom out. In Germany, someone like Teresa would receive subsidized childcare, paid parental leave, and free university for her daughter. In Canada, Jordan wouldn't have to skip a doctor's visit. Healthcare is public, prescriptions are affordable. In Japan, public transit is clean, efficient, and everywhere. A car isn't necessary to survive. In Denmark, housing is treated as a right. In France, food quality isn't tied to income. In South Korea, broadband access is a national utility. And here's the twist. These aren't all socialist countries. Some are more market-oriented than America. But they've made deliberate policy choices to support their populations, even at lower GDP per capita levels. What makes the US different? 3 things. A deep cultural suspicion of government, an economic system centered around private profit, a fragmented federal structure that breeds inequality across states. So when Jordan's car breaks down in Arizona, it's not just bad luck. It's the result of living in a system that treats basic needs as commodities and survival as a game of chance. Part 16, the future of survival. Where do we go from here? Now let's fast forward, not to another budget, but to another possibility. What if a $1,500 monthly budget could work? What if housing costs were capped relative to income? What if healthcare were a public right? What if public transit reached every zip code? What if wages grew with productivity again? These aren't utopian dreams. They're policy shifts, already proven elsewhere or in America's own past. In the 1930s, the New Deal built the foundation of the middle class. In the 1940s, the GI Bill expanded access to education and home ownership. In the 1960s, Medicare and Medicaid lifted millions out of extreme poverty. And even today, pilot programs across the US show that direct cash payments, universal childcare, and housing-first policies reduce long-term costs while improving lives. The future isn't written yet. And maybe, just maybe, the next Jordan doesn't have to make impossible choices every month. Part 17, the final takeaway. The past is a price tag. Let's return, one last time, to the question that started this episode. What if I told you that a single decision made decades ago still shapes your paycheck today? Now you know, it wasn't one decision. It was thousands. Trade deals, budget votes, wage policies, tax codes, suburban zoning laws, healthcare privatization, union crackdowns, financial deregulation, student loan expansions, military spending hikes, housing divestment, all of it adds up to you, to your $1,500. Behind every line item in your budget is a policy. Behind every policy is a story, and behind every story is a choice. The past may be over, but the price we pay for it isn't. This isn't just history, it's the blueprint of the world you live in. So the next time you ask where your money went, ask also, where did your power go? Because understanding your budget isn't just financial literacy, it's historical clarity. Thank you for watching Global History Uncharted. If this episode helped you see the world a little differently, subscribe, share, and question everything.